Hello,
Hello, Amy.
welcome. This is um, going up on the 4A YouTube channel. And this, everyone, is Christopher Azzara, who also happens to be my father. So first of all, how are you, Dad? What's going on? What's new?
I'm doing well. Things are going well. I'm in the swing of things at Eastman, doing some playing and teaching. I'm really enjoying my classes and got some good projects coming up. So all is well. Thanks.
Yay, woohoo. Um, so I'm really excited to do this interview. That wasn't a very cohesive introduction, but I'm hoping through the video we'll get to know who you are and what you're all about. So my first question, this has been interesting to do too for me because I feel like in pursuing music, I am sort of like in your footsteps learning from you slash like I've kind of come face to face with some of your work through my own like endeavors in music through music school and things like that. But then also you're my dad. So I feel like I have kind of like a behind the scenes perspective. And I like grew up kind of central to your philosophies, which is like pretty cool. Anyway, it just felt like addressing that. So that's also why whenever I introduce you, I'm like, this is my dad. Like, what shall I say? There's so much. But okay, so my first question for you is did you see a clear path when you first started getting into your work, like at the beginning, maybe when you were like my age,
Right.
younger? Did you kind of like see a clear path for where you wanted to, where you are right now?
I think that the path has always been clear because I've always been curious about creativity and I've always wanted creativity to be central in my own music making experiences. And that started as a young person. Um, and those skills were always attractive to me with musicians and singers and instrumentalists, players who had those kinds of skills. And so the clear path really was about my curiosity about how you learn to create and improvise related to how you express yourself from within through creativity, and how important it is that we have that as a part of teaching and learning and as a part of our awareness when we're performing. So that became really clear to me as I was thinking about the professional work that I was doing as a pianist. I lived in the Washington D.C. area and playing gigs and all around the Beltway and in the city of Washington D.C. And I was working as an instrumental music teacher. I taught high school instrumental music for many years at the beginning of my career. And I was starting to compare the teaching that I was doing and the kinds of skills that I was asking students to perform with what I was doing as a musician on gigs. And on gigs, I was improvising and I was writing arrangements and compositions, and I was obviously reading and developing my ear as a musician. And I was just comparing that to the kinds of things that I had been taught to do
Mhm.
as an instrumental music teacher. And I found there was some gaps there. And so that led me to think about going to graduate school. At that point, I only had a bachelor's degree, and I had stayed in the Washington, D.C. area to play music with all the great musicians that lived there, some of them in the military bands, and then just the musicians in general. Um, that was really rewarding and fulfilling. I had gone to the state school in Northern Virginia, George Mason University, and prepared myself as a pianist and as a teacher. And then my teaching job was teaching in Fairfax County Public Schools while I was doing these gigs all the while. And so that brings me to what I was trying to say, which is I was sort of making these comparisons. And after about 5 years of 4 years, 4 or 5 years of that life, I decided I wanted to go to grad school and applied and went to the Eastman School of Music in the summer of '85.
Mm.
And it's really interesting now. I'm a professor here, but um, back in those days, it was really something that I was thinking about related to not only how do you perform as a creative musician, but how do you learn that and how do you present that in a way as a teacher that's most beneficial for students.
Mhm.
So by getting involved at Eastman, I really ran into a lot of important people and developed a lot of relationships that helped me to um, think about those things in a deep way. And eventually that evolved into what I'm doing now. Uh, all the beginnings of it happened, though, in those first experiences that I had as a graduate student.
How did you find, this is not one of the questions, but how did you find the program? Because
Eastman?
really, yeah, because now, like, you've kind of created the backbone of the program is your work. So what was it when you came to it?
Well, the backbone of my part of the program is there's a lot of things that go on at Eastman. And the best part about this place is that, like many universities, is that you have the opportunity to develop relationships with people who are curious about similar things in other ways. So when I got here, I met people like Richard Gruno and Bill Dobbins and Rayburn Wright, and I was thriving because I was able to play in the Eastman Jazz Ensemble and study arranging and improvisation, as well as start to develop an understanding of how you learn to do these things.
Mhm.
Richard Gruno and I now co-author books together. So that relationship has gone from the beginnings when I was a graduate student to now, where we're working together all the time on curriculum and materials.
Mhm.
So I think Eastman itself, one of my piano teachers when I was a student um, in undergraduate school had gone to Eastman.
Mm.
And then I just knew about Eastman's reputation in jazz. And I
Mhm.
knew that they had a good summer program in music education. And so it made sense for me to dip my toe in the water. And then after that first summer, I realized that this could be a thing for me.
Yeah.
So I ended up finishing my master's and then ultimately transitioned into being a full-time student.
Mhm.
And I got my PhD here. While I was a PhD student, though, I participated in all this performance opportunities. I have a jazz degree embedded in my PhD. All the performing things that I did and all the coursework I did embraced all the requirements of my degree and included all of the
Mhm.
jazz studies requirements at the time. So it was a really exciting time for me.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's like perfect.
Well,
Very cool.
for my life, it was and is perfect because I
Mhm.
have an interest in all the things related to creativity. And so at the center of what I do every day, I get to play piano and create. And when I teach, I'm doing the same kind of things. It's all around putting improvisation and creativity more at the center of what we're doing as musicians.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about, like, comparing what you were doing to what you were teaching before.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
cool.
we hadn't talked about that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was teaching kind of how I was taught, and a lot of stuff I was doing,
Yeah.
I had good. I think you would like my bands and my ensembles. I think you would say, "Oh, those sound really great."
Mhm.
Um, it wasn't that I uh, hadn't figured that out because I certainly had, but it was mostly I was doing kind of what I had learned to do in that context,
Right.
and my creative life. That's not something that sort of was happening for me in my school situation. It was more of what I was learning as a musician and all the practical skills that I had to demonstrate as a musician.
Yeah.
But I had very supportive teachers and very supportive relationships and friends along the way that were helpful.
Well, that's why I think it's amazing to just think about like bringing improvisation creativity more to the center, because it's not necessarily like recreating everything that ever existed. It's just kind of like adjusting, contextualizing, maybe, if I do say so, question mark.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you're onto it. The idea of really embodying, comprehending music
Mhm.
uh, through creativity and by expressing creativity and really
Yeah.
by paying attention, being in the moment. Improvisers are in the moment and they do what they're doing from that place of being. And so, really, if we can pay attention and get inspired by that relationship of be and then do, or having that creative element, even if we're playing a piece that's already been written, it would be contextualized by our awareness of that creativity.
Mm. Yes. Oh, I always have so many things to think about whenever we discuss such topics.
Yeah, it's important stuff.
Yeah. Um, okay, well, this kind of leads me to another question I have, which is, um, do you have suggestions for how teachers can begin to implement the work that you have done? Maybe it's talking about that first. Some
Yeah.
of your publications and philosophies, which you've already begun, but that's where I want to go next, is how people can implement this. Where
Right.
to start?
Well, when I went to grad school originally, going back to that point, I went to improve my understanding of learning and teaching and to also improve my own skills. And so musicianship skills that you embody are really central to what folks can do to begin to put creativity and improvisation more central to what they're doing. Some people think about improvisation or playing by ear um, as a different thing than reading or other things, but I'm defining improvisation as being in the moment, and it happens when you are engaged and present. So right now, for example, you're improvising with me in language because you're paying attention and you have responses and we're having a spontaneous dialogue. And the same thing can happen in music. The same thing can happen when you read something and you have a response to it. And when you
Mhm.
write, the difference with writing is that composing or writing anything, you have the opportunity for reflection. So within time, you can travel, you can time travel when you compose because you can go back and revise things and you can think about it in that kind of thing. But there's an element of spontaneity, there's an element of being present in the moment, paying attention. And that's sort of a broader definition for improvisation that also applies to the more specific applications of creating counterpoint in the moment of performance.
Mhm.
Um, and so what teachers can do really is to pay attention to repertoire that we're learning in that kind of a way. The repertoire is a gift to us that helps us to learn the ideas of creativity and how to be convincing when we create and improvise. So you ask, what can we begin to do? First thing would be to learn a lot of tunes by ear, and the tunes can range from any style or genre. Obviously, if you're a jazz musician, you would start with the standards that we learn as jazz musicians. Somebody who plays music that is what people refer to as classical music. I don't know if I like the labels that much, but I think people would know what I meant when I said that, is having a relationship with that by ear, learning themes and harmony by ear. And if you're working with beginners, one of the things I like to help people understand is that when you're first starting out, learning the melody and a bass line or some harmony part to folk and um, tunes that are more in the folk tradition in a way that's definitely meaningful and by ear as it relates to your musicianship. So learning the melody, learning the bass line, uh, and some kind of voice leading. Uh, Voice leading is important because it helps you to know where the notes like to go. So if you're singing or playing something, if I chose a song like When the Saints Go Marching In, and you have a song, Oh, when the Saints, and you learn the bass line to that, go marching in. So the bass line would just be like the roots of the chords. Do, do, do. do, when the saints, that's do, and then it goes to do, and do, in that number, it goes to do, when the saints do, do, do. So that simple task of I'm trying to do both at the same time, but uh, singing a melody, learning its bass line, and understanding those arrival points and those relationships. And as instrumentalists and vocalists, everything comes back to singing and movement. That's another fundamental that you're asking me about. What are the fundamentals? Singing, movement are key to this, because that's how you can embody your experiences and develop your oral skills the best. The voice leading I'm talking about would just be sort of what some people refer to, I like to refer to it as the law of laziness. So if you're doing When the Saints Go Marching In, it would just be, oh, when the saints, you're here, go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Right there. Oh, Lordy, I want to be in that four chord. It still can stay there. When the saints go marching in. That kind of understanding of how the voice leading works as we develop our awareness for what the tune is. That's what I mean by learning lots of songs that way is really important. And I'm hearing myself sing, I'm noticing that I just sort of pick the key. You know, when you're working with younger people, be aware that the key you choose is important because of their vocal experience and mechanism. You want to be singing more in keys like up in here, do 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 do, so that there's this vocal relationship with the range that might be possible as somebody's first starting out to sing. Keep it up in the above middle C, up toward their head voice and those parts of the voice so that they have a chance to do that.
Yeah.
A lot of
Okay.
instrumentalists, they're particularly wind players, they play in the key of B flat at first a lot. And B flat is kind of low. So if you're down in here, I'll move this chair. You can sing something in a different key and then play it in another key. So you can sing up in here. But then when you go to play it, if you want to play it in other keys, certainly. But this is kind of where you kind of have a speaking thing, which is good for people with more developed musical awareness. But some people may not understand the gravity of how that might work melodically. So they might be saying, you know, the. If you're up in here, you're more you're more in a range that would help younger people gravitate to the singing of it. I know that it's a little bit obviously a deep point I'm making about the starting of singing, because I know that you and I have talked about how some of the ranges for jazz are down in those keys so that you can express some of the things that are really meaningful to that, right? Could you speak about that a little bit? Because you know
Yeah,
the voice.
just well, we've talked about how like a lot of times, especially with the standards repertoire, it hits harder in an actual speaking register because it's supposed to be like, oh, I'm telling you this intimate thing that's
Yeah,
kind of like a secret, like you maybe would not be singing in the head voice. But I think your point is just like making sure the person or the student is comfortable, um, and especially when people are young, the vocal range is smaller anyway. So
that's what I'm
finding
saying.
where it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and so a good way to maybe clarify this is if you did watch my TED Talk, the person in that TED Talk is your sister, Kristen,
Yes.
and she loved the key of E flat.
Mm-hmm.
She would, I don't have perfect pitch, so I have to go find that, but she would do all kinds of things, ba, 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 in E flat. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
great key for somebody 2 years old, 3 years old in terms of their vocal, the way their vocal system works, right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
just talking about that in terms of making sure that people are singing in a way that helps people understand their voice and explore the different parts of that. But
Well, it
that
also
sampling is key.
Sorry, the what is key?
Singing is key.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say this also made me think about in learning because my lessons in college were like each semester I learned 12 to 15 tunes. That was like the backbone of that. But then when I would bring them into my lessons, there was always this discussion of key
Yeah.
because even a step when you're studying the voice at, more of like whatever, a level, a level of um depth, I guess.
Yeah.
You get into like this idea of, well, what color are we going for here and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that even from the beginning in learning songs, like putting songs in different keys can kind of let go of getting stuck anywhere because the song transcends the key. Or even I know that you also change the modality as well sometimes in
Yeah.
your teaching.
Yeah, we'll take we call it musical enrichment, where we'll take a song and basically just do variations on the song. So not all songs lend themselves to this, but you take a song in major and you might change it to minor, and you take a song
Hmm.
in duple and you would change it to triple as a variation, as a way to understand it. One of the things I learned a long time ago that really helped me was that you know what something is by experiencing what it isn't. So, if you think about up, down, over, under, but major, minor, duple, triple, tonic, dominant, staccato, legato, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So that's an important part of learning a lot of songs in all these rich tonalities and meters. So learning songs that are in minor and in major and in Dorian and in Mixolydian, and learning the bass line and an inner voice, and then
Hmm.
learning duple songs, triple songs, songs in seven, songs in five, really experiencing them at a level of awareness and experience, um, helps the musicianship part. And
Yeah.
I'm just responding to the fact that some people I've worked with are not letting the child explore the voice in the right area of the voice. So they might think that um, the person they're working with isn't singing, but everybody sings. I always say, people tell me if they can't sing, I always say, well, wait, you forgot how to sing,
Yeah.
or that's a good start because you can tell that what you're doing isn't the same as what you're hearing. I mean, there's a lot of optimism around that. And so
Yes.
singing in keys like D and E flat, E and F, those are good places to start with people who are young.
Hmm.
Of course, it just gets more and more nuanced. And I mean, the key of G has a vibe and the key of D flat has a vibe. So
Hmm.
there's a lot to be said about all that. I'm just trying to point out that we need to be aware vocally. Same thing's true with rhythm, being able to move your body and keep a steady beat, and helping people to really feel what that is in their body,
Hmm.
and understand the time, the space, the weight, the flow, the effort necessary to move with understanding.
Hmm.
And this all goes back to what you asked me about what would be the most fundamental things.
Yeah.
Learning songs by ear, singing melodies, bass lines, inner voices, playing them on an so singing them, playing them on an instrument in more than one key, being able to move your body with understanding, and then be able to maybe navigate the variations we've been talking about.
Yeah.
That would be fundamental to the next steps, which would involve my seven skills, or any other kinds of techniques or teaching procedures that I've tried to um, express that would help people navigate how to get folks along that.
Yeah. So I want to go that way by another question that I'm thinking of now that's more broad, because next I want to go to like your class, the TED Talk, then to the seven skills. But maybe we could get there by discussing this idea of fear.
Yeah, yeah,
Just because as I talk to you, it's kind of like pretty straightforward. It's like the philosophies are strong and like the methods are strong and things like that. Um, so yeah, I don't know if you have any wisdom on this fear aspect. 'Cause I know you talk about it in your TED talk as it relates to improvisation. Um, and then also like it makes perfect sense to me that like teachers should begin by putting themselves in these situations of making sure their musicality is where it is so that they can pass it to their students.
Right.
Um, yeah, and then I guess just like as I'm thinking as a human, I'm like, ah, but it can be scary to try like something you never tried before, or whatever. Like feeling uncomfortable is scary to a lot of people. So wondering if you have thoughts on that whole thing.
Yeah, I found that that is true, that there's some fear. My joke in the TED Talk is that people associate improvising with two four-letter words, jazz and fear, because there requires a little bit of that kind of unfamiliarity that people might have with it. So that's what I've tried to do, is help create a context for people so that they are going from the familiar to the unfamiliar. So
Mhm,
that's a good thing to think about in terms of learning in general, is what's familiar and then can we go to the unfamiliar.
mhm,
And by learning tunes and taking a chance, taking a risk, and being in an environment that encourages people to skin their knees,
mhm,
I mean, it's okay to make a mistake as you're learning. That's what learning is. When you've already accomplished it, then you won't be making those mistakes, but you'll probably make others if you're learning because you're really trying to get at what this is. And
mhm,
so that process and being in a situation that where people support each other.
mhm.
And I always ask my classes, raise your hand if you never made a mistake, and they always laugh because
Yeah.
uh, it's that kind of embracing of contextualizing. That's what I like to do when people are in my classes, if they play a note or something, and I'll contextualize it. I think Herbie Hancock talks about that with Miles Davis, how he was able to contextualize some things that Herbie played on some performance that they gave.
Mhm,
It's a nice interview that he gives. But I think really is really making it more about telling a story
mhm,
and helping people be in the moment of that story. So by combining your awareness and your intuition, it comes back to your intuition with some sense of reason or being able to have a discipline around practicing certain skills, and then spinning back to your intuition, and then spinning when you're practicing when you practice, meaning when you're in a situation where you're trying to learn something,
mhm,
having a discipline around that, and then bringing it back to your intuition when you're performing. It's all about that interaction.
mhm,
So by focusing on those things, I think people are willing to get past their fear, let go of fear. Um, the fears that I express in the TED Talk are uh, there's the fear of dying, which we all have. The fear of unusual states of mind. Nobody wants to feel like a fool. Fear of loss of reputation,
mhm.
because you've developed a reputation, and now if you kind of make an error, then what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And the fear of losing your job, fear of loss of livelihood, which is because you lost your reputation, so now you're scared. And the number one fear,
Ah!
yeah, the number one fear in America is public speaking. People
Well,
are
we
afraid of
talked about that because
that.
I told you I was like, I feel I need to speak better, and you were like, "You can practice that."
Right.
Same
And
thing. It's like if
people, yeah.
anything you're scared of, practice is like amazing.
And being with people who support you and encourage you to do that again or do whatever you're doing in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
There's another fear. People are afraid of, how could I ever be as good as, and then you fill in your baggage. And so there's a lot of different things like that. And the whole idea would be to let go of that.
Mhm.
Think about being in the moment. Actually, don't think about it. Just be in the moment. Think about that concept as we're talking. So be
Yeah.
in the moment and pay attention and interact. And what I work on with students is their ability to interact, pay attention to how creative things, there's the grouping of things and the reuse of material. They begin to understand those groupings and compare them. Is that the same or is it not the same? And then can they anticipate what might come next? Can they
Mhm.
predict what might come next? And through those musical experiences, like if I sing, ba ba da 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 da, and you might anticipate, especially if I establish the key of this. Let me put it in this key. So if I go bum do do ba ba da da da, and you could anticipate the da, and then you would play that on an instrument, and that brings you in the moment, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And then you grow from there. How about if you did dun, and your other choice was dun, and it's about making choices in the moment. And then how about if instead of going dun dun dun, you would go dun dun dun. So there's that inner voice I was telling you about. And now choose one. And you're in a situation and people either choose do 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 or do do do, and it sounds beautiful because it's nice
Mm-hmm.
harmony, and you're off and you're running with the idea of being in the moment and paying attention to that harmonic scaffolding. Then the other thing you would pay attention to maybe is the rhythm of it. So you've got a song like what we were doing when the Saints Go Marching In before. I could do an example on that. Like I'll do it. So you have this. Oh, when the Saints go marching in. Oh, when the Saints go marching in. Oh Lord, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. So you pay attention to, first of all, when the saints, and some people say when the saints again. That's another way
Mm-hmm.
people sing it. When the saints go marching in. That's what I refer to in the poetic language of a tricolon. So now I see
Mm-hmm.
I'm drawing your attention to being in the moment. Pay attention. Ba 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 ba, and then space. Ba 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 ba, space, right? So if I do it in time, ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba. How beautiful is that? What if
Yeah.
you were to make a rhythm and do three of them and make the last one longer? So how about ba ba da ba, ba ba da ba, ba da ba, ba 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 da ba. And now you're
Woo.
in the moment of that,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of how I get people past the fear part. Because
Mm-hmm.
then it's their turn. You want to try one or no?
Sure. I know. I was just gonna say, I feel like also as a creative person, like you want to be a part of some of what's going on because you're paying attention and you're listening, hopefully.
Right. So then do you feel that? And the fear is you weren't afraid. You're like, no, I want to try.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You want to try
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, sure, sure. So I just come up with a rhythm and then
Go with the rhythm and leave a little
keep it.
space and repeat the rhythm. And it's not a formula. It's like it's the form. It's the
Hmm.
architecture of a lot of music.
Hmm.
I was doing that song Joshua before. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, 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 right? So ba
Hmm.
ba da ba da 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 da, and repeat it da 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 ba da da. Wow, that song is a gift to us.
Yeah.
If people would
Yeah.
improvise and compose like that, that's really convincing. That's the idea, is to be convincing. So on When the Saints Go Marching In, that's the form of it. Ba 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 ba, and then but right, what I was explaining before. So if you want to
Yeah.
try one, that's fun.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Um
So you move your body,
the
like go for it, because you can't do it together over Zoom. That's unfortunate.
I know, sad. Okay, I'll do da 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 do da 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 da.
Yeah, that was really nice. So that's sort of a rhythmic experience that we have in the moment.
Yeah.
Now we also know that if you zoom out of When the Saints Go Marching In, you get, instead of ba da da da, you get bum bum bum, and then guess what happens? Bum bum bum, and
Hmm.
then bum bum bum, and then it goes to bum. Now, when I do things with harmonic stuff, I like to use solfege because it has vowels and really helps us to learn the syntax of what we're singing. Syntax is how does the music unfold? Where do the notes want to go? Just like language has syntax in terms of the structure of a sentence, music also has this idea. A lot of songs do that, where they go to re or the second scale degree, and it's harmonized by so or the fifth. A lot of
Hmm.
songs do 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 do. I'm thinking of da 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 da. Tis the gift to be free. Tis the gift to
Yeah.
pray. And notice the tricolon. Tis the gift to be simple. Tis the gift to be free. Tis the gift to come down where you ought to be.
Hmm.
Um, Tricolon doesn't have to make the third one longer, but it's always nice when it does. I mean, Beethoven even used them. Blues singers, a lot of musicians, a lot of improvisers use them. Three and go. But
Hmm.
back to what key am I in? Let me see. Yeah. So I have do 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 do, right? So
Hmm.
what if we were to play with that? So this is like the middle ground of what we're doing. You think about the melody as being up in here, like I'm focusing, zooming way in. Do, 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 do. And if you zoom out, bum, ba, dee, right? If you zoom out even more, you get bum.
Yeah.
Zoom
Oh,
out all the
yeah.
way, you get the resting tone, like bum is where it all comes back in this song. That's
Right.
where it all comes back to. So what if you played with do, mi, so? Instead of doing that three times, what if you did mi, so, do, or so, mi, do, or something like that? Like, what if I did do, dee, do, do, dee, do, do, dee, do, dee, do, 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 and having that awareness, I'll sing dee, dee, do, having that awareness for the song harmonically
Hmm.
is also key. And then stylistically, being in the moment of the style. So if we're on do 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 versus the style of do 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 da, it's a different articulation, a different style, a different groove, if you will. But if you
Yeah.
zoom out, it's all expressing this thing, music. I just happen to be
I,
using examples in major.
I think that might be like one of the heaviest realizations one can have. Maybe, as I say, at the young age of 22, but um just like the idea that it transcends, because I think so many people get stuck kind of like looking up from their little circle of comfort, like, oh well, no, all this type of thing, rather than kind of like this idea that it transcends, because the way you speak is like, I don't know, it just kind of like gets rid of all of but what about it's not like all this like weeds and angst that come up, like all of that kind of fades away when it really is just music. All of it is music.
And if we pay attention to repertoire as an inspiration, I'm getting all this from repertoire. And then I'm
Right.
making connections between repertoire, what's the same, what's unique,
Hmm.
what's different. And then people stretch the envelope, then they say, well, instead of just a triad, why don't we add the sharp four? Or why don't we do a flat five or a sharp five or something? And those are
Yeah.
also triads, but
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of ways to expand and think about it, but um, because I do a lot of work with folks that are just starting out as improvising, I tend to find that starting with familiar songs
Hmm.
is important. And
Yeah.
what songs do you know, and how well do you know them, and all the above.
Yeah, yeah, and then even I just can relate it to my own education, which I loved my time in college at Frost at the University of Miami.
Yeah,
But
Frost.
yay, Frost. But just how helpful that idea is to implement in terms of learning new things, like just bringing it right to the music and to repertoire, and like connecting the dots. And I think context is super uh life changing. To have context is like, it helps you like truly understand something, for sure.
That's for sure. And I think that one big message is that an instrument is an extension of your mind, body, and spirit. It comes from within. And that to nurture the mind, body, and spirit, singing and moving and learning by ear are essential. The
Hmm.
essence of music is invisible. And if we can tap into that in all the ways that we are learning, it's really important.
Yeah. Oh, woohoo.
But I think that awareness is true in art in general, just visual art
Yeah.
and literature and the creativity of music, obviously. And one of the things that I am inspired by um, is the repertoire that I can engage with,
Hmm.
that I can interact with in a way that is inspiring me in my creativity.
Hmm.
So, for example, learning a Charlie Parker tune and a solo and singing it. And
Hmm.
I remember when you were young, I had you singing all kinds of stuff, including Hank Mobley and Charlie Parker and stuff. And I can get to all kinds of styles that way. I enjoy playing Bach in the morning. I like the way the
Hmm.
light comes into um, the living room in our house, um, and I'm able to play some Bach that really opens my ears up, and then um, maybe I'm trying to learn a Sonny Clark solo or something, or play a standard that I'm learning, and all that to me kind of helps each other, and all the different um, genres that are there can just help us remember what it is that we're trying to express, and
Hmm.
what we have an affinity for. What do we have to say, and how are we comfortable? So are we expressing some comfortable things, but also challenging ourselves to learn more, and but then ultimately expressing something from a real relaxed, in the best sense of the word,
Hmm.
space. And you're not afraid. You're like you said, you're happy to contribute to the conversation, and that's what it should be, a
Yeah.
conversation.
There it is. Do you want to say anything more specific about your class? I feel like you kind of, I mean, I'm sure a lot of it is some of this, what we've been talking, and the music making. And
Yeah,
I sat in on your class and it contextualized a lot for me, just
right.
in seeing it kind of in action.
Sure. Well, there's several classes that I do. The class that you sat in on was one that where I've with my buddy Richard Gruno, we've written a comprehensive curriculum for all things musical, and recommend that creativity be central to the learning, and improvisation be a big part of it at the beginning, especially, and all the way through your learning. And so I think what you experienced was more of the practical application of, well, how would this work? Um, People have to be aware that what we're describing here in this conversation is developmental. So it's not like if I give you this answer that you know, suddenly something's going to happen. It might, some of those things might happen faster than
Hmm.
others, but it's developmental. So you learn it and internalize it and express it in a natural growth kind of way.
Hmm.
And so I think that's what you experienced was the class that I teach that involves this kind of comprehensive curriculum for how do you start, where do you take it, what's a more
Hmm.
intermediate procedure, what's a more advanced thing.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that there's two publications that I've done. One is called Developing Musicianship Through Improvisation, which scaffolds some learning around learning to improvise and making that central to your whole life as a musician, related to all your musical endeavors. So related to your being in the moment and improvising, related to your reading, related to your composing and arranging, related to music learning, to learning theory, to
Hmm.
being able to learn the names of things with an awareness of the sound, and
Hmm.
to understand internally what that is. Um, those kinds of concepts are in developing musicianship through improvisation at more of uh, a level that says, here's how you can really prioritize learning to improvise related to that.
Hmm.
The other class that I think the one that you took is our other publication with Dick Gruno is Jump Right In, the instrumental series.
Hmm.
where we ask students to think about starting people off as a beginner with this mindset of learning their first songs by ear, both through singing, movement, and expressive performance, and then putting that onto the instrument as an extension of that awareness. And being
Hmm.
able to play by ear and learning to read and learning theory and learning to write and what would be the best practice for that. So I think what you're responding to in that class is the practical applications of how that might look or how you might hear that happen in a lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. I've loved I want to take the whole thing because I've just kind of gotten sort of like a dip in the pond
Yeah.
where I'll sit in on like 2 days or I'll get like a day and yeah, it's always just amps me up. So
Yeah,
that's
I
good.
think
And that's also word on the street. Go
yeah.
ahead. Wait, you go ahead.
I think you're responding to how musical it is. It's very, you make music, and you do so through singing, movement, and then you're playing your instrument, or in your case, you're developing more of your voice, or you might
Yeah.
even be playing an instrument as an example in the class. But I think that's what you like about it because you're such a musical person.
Oh, thanks. Well, I was gonna say word on the street too is like the just everybody gets so amped over you. Like you just have this way about you that excites people. It I think it like empowers people as well, just the way that you are. So
Oh, that's very
if you
kind.
ever get a chance to take my dad's class in an unbiased review, you should.
Oh, that's
Seriously,
very
because I've made some friends like um through your students and it's always the same, just this like enthusiasm for life and music, which you live and I think you also pass to your students and the people around you.
well. Thank you. I really think about our roles as teachers, and I was reflecting on that recently, and I'm fond of saying that we all have gifts inside that haven't been opened yet, and a teacher can wake up those sleeping gifts and lead them out, because that's really
Hmm.
what the experience should be. So as a musician who's performing, you're going to have a response from the listener, but the idea is that you would lead things out and there would be an
Hmm.
interaction. And that's what I think about in terms of learning. Learning requires creativity on part of the learner. And that's when it becomes this back and forth relationship, this interaction that is very healthy. And I think people feel like they become more confident with that, and it has an effect on lots of the aspects of the requirements of being a musician.
Yeah.
One of my first attractions to a lot of what I'm doing is the idea that somebody told me when I was a graduate student that a lot of the ideas for creativity that I had were good, but they wanted the time to teach students how to read music. And I said, well, we can do both. We need to speak and read. We need to
Hmm.
interact creatively and read. And that was what led me to my dissertation, which is essentially, yes, students can improvise at the beginning. These are fifth graders who were improvising using a lot of
Hmm.
the techniques that I was just describing. And they read with more awareness. Their reading achievement was higher because they had more awareness for the music they were making. So that's what
Oh
I
my
think people
gosh.
experience. They feel this level of awareness that they might not have had brought out of them before,
Yeah.
through singing, through movement, through improvisation, through learning to read,
Yeah.
compose, arrange, contextualize the music theory. That's just really what unfolds in the class. It's like just
Yes.
every week it unfolds more and more. So
Right. Well, it's like I feel like it's two for me it's like two paged where one page is um the idea that maybe some people haven't been asked to do it before so they have all this potential or kind of like raw things going on like raw I don't know what the word is but
yeah, maybe visceral or
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, like just stuff inside of them and then they're able to kind of like contextualize it and then the other page of that is like what you were saying with the power of teachers and how really powerful a teacher or mentor can be, which I've experienced both. Cause that's another thing I've been like really thinking about a lot lately is like going to school. I feel like a lot of my kind of like upbringing was contextualized in ways because then I was like in lessons and obviously like in classes. So all of this like immersion kind of like took shape more, I would say. Like I just feel like my shape took form a little bit more.
Right, right.
But I was also like exposed to I don't want to make it dark. I want to stay in kind of like a lighter place, but just like um the purpose of music, or like what music really should be for or about, and then how a teacher can be powerful in that, and what they say, and how the way that their musicianship is and their values. Like I
Right.
think a lot of that is like super influential for impressionable musicians. I was thinking about Skip Greer as well. So I've just been like thinking about a lot of these, like you, Skip Greer, like I mean, there's so many, like Dr. Reed was such a beautiful mentor for me. Like
Yeah.
these sort of like pillars who believe what they believe, and they have the skill set, and their job is just to share it and hopefully bring something out of their mentees. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's a page of this too where people already are doing the things, and
Hmm.
this creates more energy around that feeling of music that we make together and how that works, and hopefully
Yeah.
developing relationships where that is developed. You know, there's a it's highly motivating when you have those kinds of relationships. I'm fond of using the work of Ed DC and Rich Ryan. They have a theory of motivation, and one of the ingredients, one of human need is relatedness, and
Mm.
how that works. But also teachers have the opportunity to provide opportunities for students to have choice.
Wow. Yeah.
And once you start, another human need is the mastery, the competence. So then you start to get good at something, and those ingredients of autonomy, mastery, and relatedness, and also the choice, being able to be open to what does the student bring to this situation,
Hmm.
and how can I acknowledge and really understand that. And
Hmm.
it's yeah, it's really, I think, effective. uh, that kind of inclusion is really, I think, the way to go.
Yeah. So
And
great.
again, I told you before, as we were talking about the different aspects of my work, the developing musicianship through improvisation book has 6 parts. It has learning the repertoire, as we've discussed, learning
Hmm.
vocabulary that is inspired by the repertoire, tapping into your intuition, developing some discipline around these 7 skills that I talk about in my work, but just this idea of having a way to access essentially what Stravinsky said: when he provided himself with limits, he could be more creative.
Mm.
Being able to read and write music with this awareness,
Hmm.
reflecting, revising, doing all kinds of things. And then the 6th part is, do we have exemplars that we are using and experiencing in relationships, but also their models, and they help us with our awareness for what this could be.
Hmm.
That's how the developing musicianship through improvisation books are organized. The Jump Right In books are organized in more of a curriculum that starts from scratch, and there are lesson plans that take you through procedures to help somebody start at the very beginning of learning to play an instrument all the way
Hmm.
through advanced repertoire.
I love it. I told that story about how you would I don't know if this is too much tea, but how you would put the sticky note in the middle of my band book. We don't even have to say which one it was. It wasn't yours. And you were like, okay, this is where you're starting, because that's where the songs began. That's where the music began, really,
Right.
rather than this like unrelated, out of context. This is a middle C. Like, anyways.
Well, part of that is it all depends on the context. If you're going to learn middle C, then it should be contextual to a song.
Right.
So the whole concept is whole part whole. So a lot of times, a lot of the materials and resources that are out there start with note, 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 note. But again, you've got to group it. You've got to
Hmm.
create a situation where you hear it contextual to a story. So in music, stories are repertoire.
Hmm.
It's that kind of relationship of learning. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, people, they play a series of notes in a row, and it's more of I mean, it's all skills that we need to eventually learn in terms of that, but the context is key
Hmm.
to really internalizing it. And the context we have as musicians is all the songs we know. And how do
Yeah.
we go into those songs?
Yeah. I think it's made super straightforward too by the comparison to literature, because that's something I think that maybe is more familiar to some
Yeah,
people. Like
uh-huh.
that's
Yeah,
I feel like a cool place to I've liked making comparisons because it's just it all kind of like lines up. There's a lot of like beautiful parallels, it seems.
yeah, I make analogies to language all the time, because when you're young, you learn to speak by ear,
Yeah.
and then you learn to read and write. Uh,
Hmm.
Kindergartners speak um, more than they read. In fact, the kindergarten
Yeah.
teachers are looking for, not looking, but they're assessing the vocabulary and the storytelling skills of the young people, and
Yeah.
that's healthy to do. Tell stories and have rich language experiences. Same thing's true in music. That
Yeah.
you'll understand theory deeply the more
Hmm.
you understand the experience of music. So the adage is experience before theory,
Hmm.
and that's key to learning most anything. You have the
Yeah.
experience before or what people say, sound before sight, and um, this idea that without the experience, you're not going to have as deep an understanding. Um,
Right.
so the it's a little bit complex though, because some people may have grown up and they've learned some really important things about maybe some theoretical concepts, which are not bad in themselves, but
Hmm.
would be benefited by, or the student would be benefited by, more context orally and through singing movement and playing by ear to sort of provide an experience for whatever that theoretical concept is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so I've just been also thinking about how I feel really lucky because I just had this immersion when I was from inside the womb
Yeah,
to
from the
current day.
yeah.
So I almost see like I remember we talked about this recently where I was talking about how just like reading some sort of relationship was harder for me or something, and your point was like I think you said something about you kind of like schooled me because you basically were like, well, then it's unfamiliar, which it is, like in terms of the reading of it, because it was not unfamiliar to my ear, but the reading of it is unfamiliar to me still. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
Well, I think
just an
that's true with
anecdote.
all the things that we learn, that reading should feel like listening. So
Hmm.
the goal of reading is to look at a score and actually it's the score sings to you.
Right. Oh my
So
gosh.
if that's the goal, then there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get to that. At the same
Yeah.
time, I want to acknowledge though that there's other skills necessary for reading well. For example, if you're a piano player, you have to have the eye-hand coordination to be able to look at the score and play what it says, in a timely
Right.
fashion.
Yeah.
And that is informed by hopefully your ability to understand what you're looking at orally, not just pushing a button on the piano. So I
Hmm.
hope that makes sense in terms of the way I'm expressing it. I hope I'm making
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
That it's all important in that way, but that it's
Yeah. Hmm.
possible to actually type out stuff on an instrument,
Hmm.
but not a lot's going on this way. And we
Yeah.
want we want to have those uh, technical, or what in my publications we call them executive skills. We want those
Hmm.
to be at high levels,
Hmm.
but it should be connected to something meaningful,
Yeah.
just uh, pushing buttons.
Typing.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you're saying too is just that they're related. There's like a back and forth because I found that too. I took an improv class that was pretty like in there, like teeth out, just McCoy Tyner type of vocabulary, and like I found the piano really helpful for like teaching my voice how it felt because I was listening to recordings, but I also kind of was presented with this idea of like, here's what he's doing. So I was able to like interact with the piano and my voice and like my brain and sort of like internalize it using the piano kind of as like a tool, I guess, for internalizing it.
Yeah, that was the thing that was familiar to you. In an ideal
Hmm.
world, it would be good to sing.
Yeah,
People might say, "Well, can you sing that?" Yes, absolutely, you can sing that.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Like singing at the same time. I mean, too.
yeah, or even singing it without the piano.
Mm,
It's just, again, going back to familiar and unfamiliar, because
yeah.
you want the piano to be an extension of your awareness, but then
Hmm.
hopefully it becomes something that becomes part of your the various things you have in your life to learn.
Yeah.
Uh, the only caution that I have for myself
Hmm.
is I play the piano. It is from within me, and it's not informing me. I'm informing that way, and then we
Hmm.
become there's a relationship there that I think is really healthy toward learning and creating.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and the idea of always speaking of McCoy or any of those inventive musicians, how it includes and transcends. So
Hmm.
McCoy comes out of the style of music um, that it, in the history of jazz,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that the vocabulary should be something that comes from within, not just something that you learn theoretically and then you kind of go up and down a scale per se. There's a fine line between the you know idea of just playing notes and actually
Hmm.
meaning the notes because it's internalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's like profound too, because you can definitely, I think discerning ears can usually hear the difference.
Yeah, I
Same
thought
as,
about what?
well, I was just gonna say same as the example in the TED Talk of the excerpt where it's like pretty clear usually when you can tell if somebody understands what they're speaking about.
Yes, and when you play music, I think you can feel it when you have a real deep musician, even if they play one note,
Hmm. Hmm.
you can feel that.
Yeah.
And then if you play a flurry of notes, okay, but you feel that because it's internalized. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people say, well, how would you internalize? I would go back to if you want to internalize any genre of music, start with repertoire, sing it, move to it, understand it stylistically,
Hmm.
articulate, get it in your body, and develop the technique necessary to perform it. Because you obviously without the ability to execute it, that would you need that. Without skill, there can
Yeah.
be no art, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's key to
Beautiful.
this conversation. But I think we understand. I hope I'm being clear.
I think so. Yeah. I understand.
One story I tell just to make sure it's clear is that you can learn to spell the word dog, but what if you never met a dog
Yeah.
and you spell it correctly, but you don't know what a dog is? And how do you explain a dog to somebody without explaining a cat or a mouse
Hmm.
or a bunny or something or
Hmm.
another animal? So experiencing the dog, then when you go to spell the dog, then that experience informs that concept of spelling or theory or how words are organized and all that. I think that's probably the best way that all of that can occur. And it's important to start with the experience.
Yeah. Well said. So now I have some sort of current questions for you, present day. Um, you talked about DMTI, you talked about jump right in. And now I'm wondering what's next?
Well, the there's a there's always something I'm working on that way. Um, one constant that I have is my keeping a life going as a musician and playing the piano and keeping that energized so that I'm sharpening the saw and playing and incorporating that in my teaching, obviously, but also as a performer.
Hmm.
So ongoing opportunities for that. Publication wise, I've done 4 DMTI books. I've done book one, 1B, 2, and 3. And book one is more of an entry with pendular tunes that have like tonic and dominant tunes that move into tunes that use common chord progressions. The Italians called them partimenti. Uh, they're important songs to learn based on important harmonies and rhythms and styles. Um, I actually published book one, book two, book three, and then I went back and published 1B because there were some important classical chord progressions
Hmm.
that I wanted people to embrace. But it's hard to call them classical. They're more classic because popular
Mm.
and jazz songs incorporate these. Um, but it's a good point of access for folks learning to improvise who have that background.
Hmm.
Book two has more of a intermediate, um, there's spirituals and folk tunes and tunes like Amazing Grace and Motherless Child and Saints Go Marching In. The third book is a jazz book. It has the blues, rhythm changes, standard chord progressions, tunes like that. It's all based on that. So I think for the future of DMTI, I would write a 2B and a 3B to expand.
Nice.
Yeah, so I expanded book one to 1B, and I would do two, and then 2B would expand the range of the repertoire for that level, and then
Hmm.
three, I would expand into more advanced jazz concepts. So that's one idea that is going on.
Nice.
Um, the Jump Right In materials are being revised. We are constantly perfecting those and making them more and more comprehensive. Very excited about the work in that area. And we are currently um, working on revising all the winds, brass, percussion, and string books that go with that publication. One of the most exciting features of it is that we're having faculty at Eastman School record examples of the things that people are doing. So we are setting up
Nice.
recording sessions with a lot of the players and singers and folks. You sing on a lot of the DMTI and Jump Right In books, Amy. You were featured on a lot of that,
I
and
am.
the uh, the the different professors here at Eastman will give models for all the different concepts for that. So we're in the midst of revising those books, and I'm excited about that. And then after that, I'm going to put some publications together for piano, which I've started, but I want to help piano players take some of these concepts and directly connect them to piano playing. I think that would be helpful.
Amazing. Yeah.
So that kind of gives you an idea of never a dull moment in that part of my life.
Yeah. I also think the piano would be really helpful for vocalists as well.
Yeah,
I just found the piano to be super helpful. Like I'm uncomfortable calling myself a pianist, although I do have some skills there.
yeah.
But I just think like the piano is such a beautiful instrument for um those who are studying voice as well. So
I
that will be helpful to us too.
Yeah, piano players um, certainly would benefit from the book, but I think everybody would benefit from playing the piano. Also, I think
Yes.
everybody should learn to play drum set
Oh, yes. I
because of
agree.
the movement stuff. And as you
And
know,
bass.
in our living room, there is a drum set
There
and
is.
there is a bass.
There is a bass as well.
One of the things
Yeah.
I think I told you that you know is that when I decided when you were young, when you were born, that I would put a keyboard in every child's room, a guitar in every room. I even have a
Hmm.
banjo in one room. There's ukuleles everywhere, so that your instrument is left out on on a stand, so that it's just so convenient that you just can take it and play it. And
Yeah.
so creating that kind of space. But
Yeah.
the other thing I really enjoy doing that I have opportunities to do frequently is write arrangements and compositions. So I've always got something going on with my arranging life, writing arrangements,
Mhm.
whether it's for a publication that I'm doing or for a band that I'm going to play with or a gig that I'm doing or a concert or a recital here at Eastman or something. I'm always
Yeah.
writing arrangements as well. So that's important to me as,
Yeah. I
in
sang one
addition.
this summer.
Yes, you
Sorry, I
did.
cut you off.
No, you sang one of my pieces this summer. Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
That was fun. That came up in the car the other day.
What's that?
I was driving the song. Today started loving you. I was like, oh, I
Good
know this
song.
song. Yeah,
Yeah.
great song.
Or the one I did for you, Summer Joy, where you sang and double
Oh,
trombone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
So yes, those are the next things, but it's really more of a lifestyle for me. People laugh because I say, creativity is not an activity; it's a lifestyle.
It
Kind of
is though.
kind of sounds like a
Anyone,
self-help commercial, but that's what it is.
no, but anyone who got like a day in the life look, which I have, um, would see that. It really is, which is cool. Well, that one of my questions, I'll get there. First, I want to ask you, uh, what's the most important thing people should remember? This might be a little bit of a tall ask, but do you have something in mind?
You mean, well, that's a big question. The remembering, I think what immediately comes to mind is to find yourself with awareness, body awareness, um, just being in the moment.
Hmm.
Uh, when you learn repertoire, pay attention, get inspired by the pieces you're learning so you can create your own pieces so that
Hmm.
when you express yourself, it's coming from within. Many of the things we talked about before when we were talking about specific things that you could do as a musician, um, really paying attention to the repertoire we're learning in a way that's really inspirational and
Hmm.
doing from a space of being is really the most healthy way. People say to walk the talk, but I think we should do the be.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
it's
think that's
true.
probably that's kind of philosophical, but
That's what I was
uh,
looking for.
yeah, but as far as practical application, I think we did talk about that.
Yes, for sure. Um, okay, because I'm gonna get back to the lifestyle. That's where we're gonna end is the interview is in this lifestyle realm. But I want to ask, I guess this is kind of lifestyle as well. If you have any influences that you'd like to state, musical, personal, literary, art, anything.
Yeah, I've given some thought to that. It's interesting. I was talking about the be and the do and all that. And I do enjoy reading, as far as literary is concerned, or any kind of philosophical. I do enjoy reading philosophy. I was reminded of Socrates, who um, essentially said that all that notation can do is remind you of how musical you are. That's my
Mm-hmm.
musical translation of his concern. He was concerned that if you um, always read things without conversing,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that you would. He was saying that it's really healthy to have dialogue, and
Mm-hmm.
this idea of these ancient ideas of rhetoric, oratory, and the dialectic, and it's the dialectic that involves that conversation piece.
Mm-hmm.
I think is really critical to the learning of anything, but in our case, music. That would be improvising and conversing that way, and counterpoint. And then we even have a word for it in music, point and counterpoint, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, some of that philosophical stuff. I also literature-wise, I've enjoyed in my development reading Huxley or Orwell, some of those concepts of Brave New World or some of the things that George Orwell has written. I've enjoyed reading that as it relates to learning and life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as I do read novels too, um, and I do a lot of reading, so obviously
Yeah.
that's important. Um, I'm a photographer, so I really enjoy photography big time. Really
Mm-hmm.
love it. Um, and the most famous photographer is one of my favorites, Ansel Adams, uh,
Mm-hmm.
or any kind of photography that really has these same kind of qualities we've been talking about musically. And
Mm-hmm.
when I was in Italy, I saw in person these paintings by Caravaggio that really brought me in the moment and um, really inspiring stuff. You can see I have a
Mm-hmm.
Matisse actually in my studio here.
Yes.
So all of it revolves. I think that Matisse is actually called improvisation. I'm pretty sure.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, as far as that's art and literature. As far as
Mm-hmm.
musical inspiration, that's big. I know that when I was little, my mother tells me that I would sit in front of the speakers of the stereo and just rock my body when I was really young, like 2 years old, 18 months old. As soon as you could kind of move your body that way, 2.5. And my dad was really into Errol Gardner and Oscar Peterson, and that
Mm-hmm.
probably got in there. The pathways of that music got in there. And so my father and my father, Dick Bruno called him the source, and my mother was really good at the listening. I would be practicing the piano, and my mom was listening in the kitchen. And the way when I grew up, the piano was positioned in such a way where there was a wall there, but the kitchen was right on the other side of the wall. So I knew, and that was
Yeah.
a good thing for me, that I knew that I wasn't just alone playing the piano. It was in the middle
Yeah.
of the house, literally in the middle of the house, just like we set it up
Wow.
in. So
Yeah.
mom and dad, but also my children, you, Amy, have taught me a lot and influenced me a lot. I've learned a lot from you and a lot from David and a lot from Kristen. As far as
Oh,
influences are concerned, I really, truly um, have learned so much from that. Um, Musical influences, I know that the kind of music I like, the Wynton Kelly, Herbie Hancock, Sonny Clark, hard bop, bebop style of jazz playing very much is exciting for me, where you just have an
yeah.
opportunity to swing and play some beautiful lines together and interact and converse musically. It's my favorite. Accompanying and playing melodies, trying to be in situations where you can maximize the playing melodies with each other, and and having that spontaneous counterpoint is really the musical um, influence, those players that I just mentioned, as well as, like I was saying before, the Bach, any of the Western classical music that I've grown up with has really helped me and influenced me a lot. So I hope that kind
Yeah.
of gives you an overview of that.
Absolutely. You honestly also led me to my finale question.
If you now question.
Um, which is, um, I guess it can be open ended. I'm just curious about balance because one thing that I've observed of you is that you've sort of you maintain this idea of balance in your life where you I think some of it you're going to probably say is about establishing priorities because you very clearly prioritize your family and your teaching and you exercise and you so you like take care of yourself um and you just I don't know if you think of them as rituals, but to me I like see habits that you have created for yourself that create a lifestyle that's balanced. And as a kid, like you were always home for dinner, like literally every night we had family dinners. That was important to you, and you and mom hang out. Like, so I just am curious about kind of your thoughts on how you've maintained balance or how you've gone about that. Because that's also something that I'm kind of trying to shed in my young 20s. Is like, what's important to me? How am I finding balance? What is my life? Type of thing.
Yeah, that's a really important and excellent conversation to have, and it's ongoing. Um, the first thing I think about is those habits. For example, practicing the piano and using the word practice to mean do, kind of like
Mhm.
how lawyers and doctors talk about their practice. So
Yeah.
when I'm alone at home and I'm sharpening the saw and I'm really in the moment of that, um, it ripples onto my concerts or gigs or my teaching, because all of my classes involve music making. Every single
Mhm.
class that I teach, we are engaged in music. That's the idea, right? So
Mhm.
I think that those habits that you mentioned, just developing that, developing the idea that I want to find a time to go to the gym um, most of the days of the week. Um, I think a lot of this revolves back to knowing my roles in life, and knowing the goals that I have for that. So I have I want to maintain the respect and health of my body. So that's motivating. But if you
Mhm.
zoom out of that a little bit, you might think of the roles and goals like personal ones. I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a father, I'm a brother, I'm a friend.
Mhm.
So meditating on this idea that, all right, so how can I um, uh, engage in relationships around those roles and do them meaningfully and pay attention when I'm in those contexts. And then
Mhm.
professionally, as a musician, I'm a pianist, an arranger, composer, a teacher, an author. And
Mhm.
so always having things, I like to use the analogy of a stove. There's always something that's,
You said this to me. Sorry.
yeah. What's that?
Yeah. You said just whenever I would kind of get a little bit down in the dumps, you said this to me in college.
Yeah, you have
What you're
something
about to say.
Yeah, something that's ready to be served. It's cooking and it's there. And then there's something that you are cooking that's in the process. And there's something
Mhm.
over here maybe simmering that's maybe on the back burner right now, but it's going to come forward because once this one gets served, they all move forward in their idea and they all have a life of their own. So
Yeah,
loving that and maintaining that as the different roles that you play, for me
yeah.
is really professionally rewarding and fulfilling. And then I
Just really
have
quick,
my,
you said,
oh yeah,
sorry, really quick, you said that to me. I think I just want to mention that I was distracted by ego of others. I was like just dark about the way that people are. And that was
yeah,
something that you had said is just kind of like focusing on your thing in a in a way that prioritizes your values and everything. Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
yeah. Yes, that the values is a big part of it, and then the relationships are a good part of it, and focusing on how we're serving the art, we're serving the music, and
Hmm.
um, I've had good mentors that are really humble and do it in such a way that's so confident. You know, this idea of
Hmm.
confidence but being humble. It's
Yeah,
much better. And I was
yeah.
only just going to say that I am real interests in drawing and in photography. Um,
Hmm.
I'm really interested and inspired by photography.
Hmm.
It's my hobby. I actually even shoot film. I've been shooting black and white film. I've
Hmm.
been taking all kinds of pictures with my digital cameras. That's great. But just first of all, experiencing it without the camera. That's the first step to being a good photographer in my mind. So if you want to be a good photographer, you have to improve your sight. If you want to be a good artist, you have to improve, your ability to see. And
Hmm.
then when you take the photo, it even just talking about drawing or photography, I see better.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. And the same thing for music. It's a way, to understand orally better because you're a musician and you really understand what you're hearing. And
Hmm.
any of that um, is inspiring to me. So I think the balance comes from how to uh, understand the roles and the goals for that. Related to, I don't look at it one day at a time. I look at it months and weeks at a time, like how to manage all the things that I'm responsible for.
Hmm.
And look at the month, look at the week. And as far as my gigs are concerned, I space them out over a couple of years. If someone hires me for something and they want me to do a gig and I really have too much going on there, I know to say, hey, I'm happy to do this for you. I would love to do this for you or with you or serve you in this way. Can we do it next month or next year? And that way there's some space in there. And so managing the
Yeah.
calendar that way, that's kind of a practical answer for the balance
No, I
part.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, and I'm committed to my relationships. I'm committed to what it takes to be a good musician and a inspiring teacher. And
Hmm.
and I think these other aspects of my creativity also serve to help me to be me.
Yeah. Yeah. How many days of German?
I'm on of Duolingo. I'm
Yeah,
on
little known fact.
yeah, I'm on day
He has a streak.
920, I think.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I do it every morning. I have a cup of coffee. And mom
Yeah.
and I sit and talk for a little bit, and then I go do the German for a while, and then come back. But or I do the German first, and then mom and I spend some time together in the morning.
Yeah.
But yeah, every morning I do some German because I'm doing a lot of gigs in Germany now. Uh,
Yes.
this year alone, I think I have three, and it just started as a way to. It started because of COVID. Um, Well, no, it started before that. So before COVID, I had a gig in Berlin and I had 100 days before the Berlin gig. And I'd already
Hmm.
taught in Germany several times. And I thought, you know what? I want to invest in the relationships I have here. I already have invested. I have really deep friends over there and colleagues. Let me
Hmm.
learn some German so I can really even make that better. So I started and I said, well, how would it be if I did 100 days of Duolingo? What would that do to my awareness when I go to Berlin in 100 days.
Yeah.
So then COVID happened and I didn't go to Berlin. It got canceled.
Oh,
Yeah, so now it's 920 days later. I'm still doing it.
amazing.
Yeah.
And you've been though too. That's
What?
the other cool thing.
What? What?
Well, you've been like you kept it up because I think maybe it was postponed. Like then now it's just like a fact of life.
Yeah, I have been since COVID restrictions have been not as there haven't been as many. Um, in fact, I'm going to Germany in November. I'm doing a gig there in Hamburg at the end of November. Yeah.
Very nice. Love it. Um, I think we talked about everything. This is awesome.
Yeah, I think this is I hope that the kinds of things I expressed was what you were thinking about, and
Yeah.
um, you have a lot of awareness, Amy, that we should do a thing where I interview you,
Oh gosh.
and then you could share some of the things that you've learned and want to do. So
Maybe so.
I mean that you've got a lot going on, girl.
Thank you. I really I'm trying to get this balance thing in check because every time I have days off from work, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a musician. And then I like my creative brain just goes like or like during when I have these stretches of work, I haven't had the same. So I'm gonna order my keyboard. I think that will help. And
Yeah,
I have kind of like written out my days off and like I organize my calendar so that
nice.
way I can like have that idea of like the balance of what are the things I'm doing and like how can I carve my time in meaningful ways, you know?
Yeah, even if you sing or play the piano for half an hour at night, I used to do that
Yeah.
when I had responsibilities that were in the morning a lot. I used to do it at night. I just found times
Yeah.
to really make it just it doesn't have to be like a 6 hour dive. It could be just to get you started. What happens to me is
Yeah.
that I get started for half an hour and then it turns into an hour and a half. Or the joke in the family was I was going to go up and get ready to do
Yes.
something, and I would play the piano.
I know. Literally, well, but that's something you also do though that I'm learning to do is like I've noticed that you will carve time so that you have time for that. So you might say that you're going to take a shower at 9:30, but your first obligation's at 11:30. So really what can happen is that you have this like creative time
Right.
and then you can do the thing and then you go to the thing. So
Yeah,
I'm like learning about that too, just so because my other big thing in college was I was like always rolling up. Like I got rehearsals down, like I was on time. But most other things that weren't like school, I was
right.
like getting there last minute because I would do things like that where I'd like write and then I'd be like, oh, I should have left 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it's
you have a
creative
lot
brains
of
are cool though.
what's that?
Creative brains are cool. I love
They
it. I
are,
wouldn't have it
and
another way.
right, and you've got so much creativity going for you. So just try to
Thanks.
document it in a way that helps you to tap into it even more deeply, and you've seen a lot of things through. You've done a lot of great projects.
Thank you. I have more coming as well. Okay, thank you so much, Dad, Christopher Azzara, Dr. Azzara, for this interview. I always learn so much when I talk to you about things, and I'm excited to share this with the Foray community. Um, you can find Christopher by his website. He is a professor at the Eastman School of Music, so you can find him there. He does gigs internationally, so wherever you are, where do you put your upcoming gigs? They're usually
They're on
on your website?
both the Eastman website and my personal website.
Okay. And then anywhere else that you want people to find you, you have a Facebook. There's a DMTI Facebook as well.
Yeah.
Um, any of the socials, he's on them, and maybe you'll get to see him in person, like I
Yeah.
do.
Come and take a class or something. That'd be fun.
Yes, yes, highly recommend. Okay, thank you so much. We're gonna end this here. Anything you'd
I
like
just
to
wanted to
wrap up
say,
on?
yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. You're an inspiration, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, Thank you. Yay, this is so fun. Okay. See you all later.